Hi everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whichever time zone that you're in. Thank you for taking the time. So today I'll be going through a session on KPIs, which is key performance indicators, a highway to basically uh, get value from testing, right? So, so this is what we're going to go through. Quick introduction. My name is Rohith. I'm the VP for Pre-Sales and Solutions Engineering. I've been with the company for the past 5 years, right from when we were a small startup in Silicon Valley. Uh, and then I moved to India a few years back. And then I'm based out of Bangalore in India and lead the team here. So that's the quick introduction about me. Without further ado, let's get started and talk about KPIs, right? So that's why we are all here. So this is the agenda for today. What are KPIs? We're going to understand like what does it mean? What are the definition when I say, because KPIs can mean so many things in different parts. What is it in terms of testing, right? So or performance testing, right? And then why measuring these KPIs are important. How does it kind of help our testing journey, right? That's what we're going to look at. Then I'm going to show you a few sessions and a demo, right? With this, it's going to be more hands-on, and don't need to worry. You don't have to make notes. Everything is documented. The team also helped me here. So with this demo, we're going to go through different methods in which the KPIs are basically captured. And then comparison, where in this case, we are going to look at 4 different cases or 4 different methods to capture these KPIs. So we are going to drill deep and understand what are all the different ways in which you can capture KPIs. All right. So what are KPIs, which is key performance indicators? So a KPI is basically a time, right? So in this case, for testing, from the context and that I am talking about today is uh, a time duration. When you say, for example, you look at right. So is it time? Yes, it is time, right? So we're going to talk about time. And what are some of the examples? So, for example, login time, logout time, time to launch an application, time to view a cart, time to go to checkout. If you're, let's say, it's a flights application, so you'll see that time to basically uh, look at how much time does it take to book a flight. Each app, for example, if you go to banking sectors, the KPIs kind of change, right? So if you look time to view balances, time to start a savings account, checking account, it can change, and this is custom to the app and the domain that you're working on. So I've just given you some examples here, which are more generic, right? But you can define these custom metrics depending on the application that you are building and testing, right? So in short, what is a KPI? It's basically a time measurement between a certain step in your test journey, right? For example, login journey, login time. So time it takes when you enter the login details and then hit the submit login button, and to time where it takes you to the home screen where you are logged in, right? So that is the login time. Again, this is you can define login time custom to how you want to measure it so that it's consistent and you keep measuring this throughout your testing life cycle. So that's what a KPI means and now why do we need to measure these KPIs? So what is the context? So what you're seeing here, what does it mean? I'll just give it a second for you to put your thoughts together on the image that I'm showing you here. So this is basically a needle in a haystack. this is what is happening in our testing journeys, right? So there are like thousands of tests that we are doing and running, whether it's manual tests, unit tests, regression tests, so many tests that we are running. And now why are we doing these tests? They're basically trying to find out where are the bottlenecks, where are these challenges for an end user that how do we decide we can replicate and find these issues earlier and then fix it, right? So among all these tests, now we are trying to find those one or two user journeys where these issues really exist. And that's basically like a needle in a haystack. That's what I'm trying to tell you here. Now, going into this, like once that's the challenge, right? So that's the challenge that we're talking about, wherein you're trying to find these few tests or like particular parts of the app where the challenges are there. Now, why measure these KPIs? Why do you need login time, logout time, all these? You're anyway measuring the entire user journey. Now, why care about these individual specific KPIs, right? So because there are so many issues or maybe challenges that you may call during the user journey, or maybe there can be numerous app crashes, application issues, client server issues, and then device issues, meaning like client side, network, server issues. So many of these that can exist, right? And now I'm not even talking about different device combinations, OS versions, so on and so forth, right? Locations, right? Platforms, Android, iOS. So, and then if you're into OTT media streaming, so there's a whole bunch of array of devices, right? So when it comes to Tizen TV, WebOS, all these other device combinations that are out there. Now, with all these varieties that exist, now if with KPIs, you're able to pinpoint and say, if I consistently see that, I'm giving an example now, right? So if my login time is consistently at 3 seconds, I know that I can guarantee this in production, right? So during my testing, I've seen that consistently I see a login time of 3 to 4 seconds. Now, this is the confidence with which you can release an application and say that, I can guarantee this level of experience for my end users. So when you see these KPIs go above and below a certain threshold, right? For example, let's say I can consistently see that a particular KPI, let's say add to cart, is 10 seconds, right? So that is a low-hanging fruit that I can go and say that, okay, now my add to cart user journey is 10 seconds. Now let me go and see what is happening in this particular time interval. What are all the network requests that are making? What is happening on the client side, the server side, client-server communication? So that I can go back and see and focus on that particular region and fix those so that, I can get those low-hanging fruits ironed out. That's what we're trying to say. That's why. So this is, I called it Stone Age, just because, when we are running a regression test suite, when you say, 10 out of 100 tests, 90 passed, 10 failed, I call it Stone Age because gone are those days when customers were happy and end users, when I say customer, end users were happy with just an application able to do what it's supposed to do. Let's say if I'm going to a hotels application and trying to book a hotel, trying to search for it and trying to search for some hotel and trying to say, let's say I'm going to San Francisco and trying to book a hotel, and then it just takes me forever. What am I going to do? I'm just going to close the application and say this is not doing what it has to. Just go to some other different application. Very simple. That's how easy it is. Now, why is this behavior? Is because everybody is used to the experience as to what digital natives really provide when it comes to Facebook and Google and Instagram and all these other apps that people are used to. And now when they come to using another application for, let's say, banking or e-commerce or whatever, right? So if they are not able to get that kind of experience, which they're used to, now they just switch. It's very easy for anybody to just uninstall an application and just move on and try something else, right? So which is why pass and fail in today's world is not relevant, right? So what do you do next? This is new age, which is what I've called, wherein you're measuring all your key KPIs, right? In this case, I'm just showing you add to cart and age verification. And you're looking at these KPIs consistently. So the x-axis is basically telling you the timeline as to when these metrics were captured, and the y-axis is the time it takes for that particular KPI. So if you see here in this, the add to cart, it's one of them is taking in, let's say, this on the y-axis. This is a threshold. Also, if you see a red line here, the threshold that you've set is 3 seconds. And then these metrics are around this, where it's telling you a trend, right? So this is what is called as new age. So the regression test, the same test that you're running, now you're empowering and making it so much more robust that you're able to capture these metrics in all your tests and get value out of the test that you're already running. All right. So moving on. So this is basically the context to what I'm going to do today and present. The next is where we're going to get a little more hands-on, and I'm going to show you different methods to basically capture what we just talked about, right? So there are basically 4 ways that I'm going to talk about, and I'm assuming people who are watching this understand Appium, the basics of Appium, and then if not, pretty sure you can just go to the website appium.io or headspin.io. You can find a lot of documentation that is there, and we've done a lot of other webinars talking about basics of Appium, and then come back so that you understand. But all said and done, I'll also try to brush up some basics and then go into the details of what I'm going to explain. So in briefs, so we'll talk about the case 1, which is measuring KPIs based on Appium elements. So now what is this? Appium elements, what is Appium? What are you looking at here is a Appium desktop or a web inspector. And this, I've just taken an application here, Expedia. Just use Expedia quite a lot. It's because of travel. So in this case, let's say to capture any KPIs, right? You need in your automation script, you basically need some sort of a marker where to start the timer and where to stop the timer, correct? So now in this case, what we are doing is we are looking at a marker. The marker that we are using and the reference is an Appium element. What is an Appium element? It's a UI element. That is, you see here, when you inspect a particular application, it will tell you what are the elements that are there. So let's say as soon as you click on the app, you start your, let's say if you're looking at a login or time to launch the application. So for example, when you click on the application until it loads a particular page, in this case, let's say it loads this particular page, and you're looking for a certain icon or a button to load, and you're verifying that as long as this particular button has loaded, now I stop my timer here. So that is Appium based KPI capture. So let's go back to this example I've done, this demo that I'm going to show you here. So this is a session, it's basically a recording with HeadSpin, right? Let's understand this geography of this report. So in this case, on the right hand side, you'll see there's a complete video recording for the test. And then on the left hand side, it's telling you where this test was done, and all the logs are captured here. On the left hand side, you can download the video, the HTTP archives. Then this is all the logs, excuse me. And this is the entire system level view. All right. So what I'm showing you here is in the context of the test, which is basically, and in the context of using HeadSpin. But let's say if you want to try this and you're not using HeadSpin, you can still do this. I wanted to keep it open. So I also have the documentation that you will have access to. So this is the detailed documentation that we have for this particular webinar, right? So if you see, we are going to talk about the different methods. I just wanted to give you context before I jump into the actual demo, right? And here are the requirements, right? Some setups that you need. And this is basically on Android that the tests have been written. Expedia, Chrome browser, Python 3.8 and above. So the setup is very simple. These are some steps, but all you need to do is once you just clone this Git repo and then pip install all the requirements. So it will install everything that is required for you to run this test. Then set up your environment. You can always use a local setup. I just use HeadSpin because I love to use HeadSpin. It's just easy and convenient. But you can always use a local Appium server. So you can download. I've also given you the installation setup. So that instead of using a remote WebDriver URL, you would use a local WebDriver. So set up a new Python environment so that you don't mess with your existing Python environment, right? So, and then activate that. Pretty simple. And once you do that, now this is where, this is a test flow. What are we doing? Simple, launch the app, open the homepage, open account, click profile, verify, and then go to the accounts page. Like coupons, credits, and then go back to the home page and then search from the bottom. That's the typical test flow. And then similarly for Amazon, we just took a web script on Chrome browser, open Amazon.com, search for Apple iPhone. Select the first one from the list. And then if you click on a few other things, right? So this is the test that we are looking at from a testing perspective. Now let's go back. I just wanted to make sure that I give you context. You can always download Expedia from here. This is a test. Because there is short time, I would focus on explaining what is there. You can always go back and run these by yourselves using this once you clone it. So what are we doing here? Now let's come back to this. Once you run this test, this is a recording. This is a HeadSpin performance session, but which is basically helping us visualize this data in a simpler way. But you, as I said, you don't have to use this. You can still go ahead and use your own local Appium server and still capture the same metrics. Okay. So let's understand what is happening. It makes life simple here. In case of Appium elements, in this case of session report, as I was explaining earlier, this is a video recording and all the logs are captured here on the left-hand side. And this is as you scroll down, this is your waterfall UI, basically an X-ray vision into the app telling you, and it's tied to the video on the right-hand side. I'll just pop this out so we exactly know what is happening. So as I hover on this, if you see the video on the right-hand side, we are basically opening Expedia, the same test case that I explained earlier, going to my account, profile, coupons, and go back to the search part. Now, once this test is completed, what we have done is inside the script, we've also captured certain key KPIs, right? The KPIs that we are looking at here is time to launch the application. If you see here, when I click on it, it will show me the areas. Launch the application, time to view account, time to view the profile, coupons and credit, and then search. Now, there's also a category that we have defined. It's called find by element. Now, what is happening here? Let's understand is, so we started this when we launched the Appium driver. That's when the timer started. So we basically started the timer here. And then when we found this particular element, this is where the timer stopped, right? If you see this blue icon, this is the time for the launch. Then as soon as we found this element, how do we know what element? You see accessible ID and the values profile dot button. As soon as we found this, we basically stopped the timer and said, this is the time it takes to launch the application. Very simple, right? So now what is this time? You see the start time was 0 milliseconds and then it ended on 10.78. So the total launch time is 10.78. So this is the most simplest and straightforward way of doing KPI capture. Similarly, if you see here, so once you understand this, which is why I'm spending more time here, once you understand this, the rest of the things are pretty simple. Same here, as soon as you found search for an item element here, we basically started the profile KPI, right? Then once we found this particular Appium element, that is where it stopped. Now, how much time did it take for the profile load? So we started the timer at 16.91 and 23.07, and this is the time 6.16 seconds. So pretty simple, right? So that's number one. So what I've also done is there is very clear documentation. So I had my team who did really good work, who helped me out with this document. You can see this. This is how you run this particular script. Once you clone this, just run Python and then put the UDID of the device and the URL. In case you're using a local WebDriver versus a remote HeadSpin WebDriver URL. Simple. All right. Going to the next one, right? And if you guys have any questions, feel free to post it on the comments. I'll come back to the questions in the end so that we are cognizant of the time and we are able to cover all the things that we wanted to cover. And in the end, we can definitely go back to the questions and you can always reach out to me later. So the second one is, this is a little different. That was the previous example. It was a mobile app, right? So the second one, in this case, it's document ready. So people who are familiar with the web world, there's something called as a document ready state. Now, what does that mean? Just to quickly summarize for those of you who are not familiar with it, right? So when a particular web page loads, and how do you know whether it is complete? So there's something called as a document.ready state. So once that particular application or the website has completely loaded, the document.ready state, you can see that as complete. Now, I think many of you would have already guessed. In this method for KPI measurement, what we are doing here is we start the timer when we click on enter for a web page, when we start loading the web page. And then when we see that there is the document.ready state is complete, which is what you are seeing here, right? When you look for this particular metric, once this is completed, that is when you stop the timer. That is a particular page load time. Now let's go back to this. This is how it will look like. Now let's go back to the example, right? So each of these, you can basically run these scripts for them. What I've done is I've basically taken a snapshot of it and run a state session with the same arguments for this particular document.ready state. So this one is document.ready state. We are looking at Amazon.com. I was already explaining. We can also look at what the test session is all about here. So this is a video recording just to reiterate what is happening here. And then your waterfall UI. So as you hover on this, you'll see that this is what are we doing here? Open the Amazon.com, search for iPhone 13, and then we just click on the first device that just appears. Look at device details, then click on another tab. So now what this is where now let's go back into once we understand this use case. Now what is there? How do we? What are we doing here? We started our timer when we started loading this particular. Clicked on enter, right? So here we are looking at search time. Time to search for this. Let's go back here. Search page results. Now we are looking at search results page. Once we clicked enter, that is where we started the timer. Now, once we found out that this particular document is completely loaded using the document ready state, we basically stop the timer here. Now, when you click on this, it will tell you that this is the time it took. This was 6 seconds. In let's say when you're doing it without HeadSpin or just using a local RPM when you're trying, in that case, it would be just you capture this metric and you put it as part of you print it out, or you in a more sophisticated way, you can always start inputting all of this into a database, right? So create a schema that of all the runs and with all the metrics that you want to capture, and you start putting all these data into that database. With HeadSpin, which is what I love, right? So everything is easy because once you start capturing these metrics, it is automatically ingested into the database. So these custom KPIs appear in the context of the test, and it's very easy to understand here. Then you can come back and replay this execution and see how these KPIs are captured and how did the test look and how is the experience for the end user when they see this kind of load times. All right. Now that we covered two methods, now let's go into the next one, right? So the next one is the advanced version of case one. So we understood what an RPM element is, right? So, but what happens is sometimes the pages are dynamic, or sometimes you are not sure which particular element to pick, or there might be more than one element that you want to basically look for. So in that case, in case of dynamic elements, or in case you want to be double sure when a particular page is loaded, this depends on how you want to treat this. Ideally, this is the ideal place for this method to be used is for dynamic pages. So in this case, what happens is you're not looking for just one RPM element. You're basically looking at an array of elements. That is what I'm trying to show you here, right? Look at for the list of locators, right? It's an array wherein you look at a whole bunch of RPM elements and making sure that one of them at least exists. And if one of them exists, that is when you start or stop the timer to capture a particular KPI. Okay, so now how is this working? This is pretty similar. When you look at the timeline, it's going to be very similar to what we saw earlier, right? And here it's again we are looking at Expedia. Now you're used to this dashboard. So what is happening here? We are looking at the same metrics, but what we are doing is we are not just looking at one particular element, but we are looking at an array of elements to capture the same launch profile and coupons and credit load times. I'll just give you a couple of seconds for, I'll just take a pause here and see that you're able to understand and comprehend. All right. So moving on, right? So let's go back to the final one, which is just one of my favorites, and which is what I've seen many customers really love, is visual page load analysis. So whatever we have seen till now, let's to revise, right? So we looked at RPM elements. What did we do here? We looked at specific ID and then start and stop the timer based on that. Second one, for web pages, we basically started looking at a particular function, document, or ready state. If it is complete, then we say that a particular page is loaded and make a note of that time. For dynamic pages, we basically looked at an array of elements and saw that then either one of these are there, or just say that you look through it and say that if either one of these is there, just make a note of this and then say that this is the time it takes to load. The third one is a HeadSpin proprietary. This is something, because we understood that these are all the methods that are out there. Said, is there any better way to do this? Or what is a more optimized way of capturing these KPIs? And I'll also compare and contrast what are the difference between each one of these, right? With the same examples. So how does this work? The visual page load analysis is based on the billions of tests that we have run through the platform. And we're able to say what exactly is a particular page load time based on what an end user is experiencing. So this is an AI-based model that we have built based on all the tests, the billions of tests that we have run through the platform over the last 9 years, right? Now, how does this work? If you see here the same timeline, I think you're already familiar with this. This is the HeadSpin waterfall timeline. So you basically select a region of interest, right? So this is the region of interest marked in between this, the grayed out region, right? So in this region, until this starting here and ending here. So this is the region of interest. So you just mark this region. If you see the slider is actually moving and you're marking that area of screen 1 to screen 2. Now what it does is, now the HeadSpin engine, that now that you have marked the area of interest, it basically analyzes this region and says that, between these regions, what is the time it took actually to transition from one page to the other. And now it gives you this purple region, which says that this is the actual page load time. Now let's go to that example, right? And see what exactly is happening here. Now let's compare and contrast to each one of these examples that we already looked at, right? So finding elements using the RPM, right? So this is the RPM way. This is the number one that we saw, right? So in HeadSpin, we basically started this API here. If you see here, this is where the launch time, the screen 1 when we started this API, and this where we stopped this timer. I'll just pop this out so it's bigger. Now, what did the HeadSpin? So this is where how you select this region. You select the region and say, I want to do page load request, right? And say launch time. So now that once you submit this, what will happen is it will basically analyze this region and say that what is the time to launch. Now, what is that time to launch? This is that purple region. If you see here, this is the exact time for launch. Now, why am I saying this is the exact time? How do I know that? So as you hover on this, starting from here, this is not where the app has actually started and clicked on it, right? So this is where the RPM driver actually started. That's the timer that we are capturing. Now, when it actually started loading, if you see here, once it transitions to launching, that is when we started, that is when this particular timer starts. And then it continues here. And then once the home page is loaded, that is when it actually stops the timer here, even though the area of interest is bigger than this, right? So this particular purple region is actually the launch time. We'll go through more examples. I think it'll be much more clearer as we go through it. So if you click on this, this is the launch time. Now, if you see here, this is 11.78 seconds. Compared to this, what was the RPM's launch time? Sorry, this is 3.98 seconds, right? So this is the actual launch time. But when you look at finding element through RPM, it is 10.78 seconds. Can you see the difference? Right? So this is what a real user will be experiencing. Whereas RPM, even though it gets you close to what you want to measure, it's something is better than nothing, right? So it gets you at least close to measuring the KPIs, but this is where the accuracy of these KPIs kick in. Similarly, for the profile load, with RPM, you see that this is the area of interest where a particular RPM element started, but then this is where it stopped. But the actual profile load time is when you actually transition and you click on profile, and if you see there is a click app event happening, and then it just loads this profile page, and once it loads the profile, that is when you stop the timer. But then if you see this, but it's still looking for certain different element. So this particular RPM is still continuing to look for the load time, which is why this is 6.6 seconds and this one is 4.51. So this is visual page load analysis versus the RPM element-based KPI approach. So the next one, let's compare. So the next one is the Amazon example with a particular page load request using document ready state, right? So this was your document ready state KPIs for searching an item, right? So this is the search page result. Now, the same thing, we started the timer around the same time with the HeadSpin APIs. So this is where we started and this is where we ended. But what is the actual search time? When you actually click on that search icon, that is where it has started here. And then when the page has completely loaded here. So visually, this is where the time it actually took to actually search. This is 3.21 seconds, whereas through RPM, it was 6 seconds. Similarly, you can look at device details, which is basically when you click on that particular device, this is the time it takes. This is 2.51 seconds compared to 11 seconds, right? Oh, this keeps on loading. This is the time it takes because you're basically waiting for this particular element to complete loading. Or rather, in this case, it was document ready states, pardon me. So in this case, because this was document ready state, until the document.ready state says complete, you still continue the timer. Whereas from a user experience standpoint, this is the actual time it takes for this particular metric. So the final one, which is an array of elements, very similar to the first approach, wherein you look at multiple elements for dynamic pages. You don't, I mean, sometimes I just showed you one example where there are few dynamic elements in cases where the elements can just keep changing. So in that case, using how many elements would you put in an array, it just becomes very challenging in certain cases. So in that case, this visual page load analysis is very, very useful. Again, same example, launch time is 11.28 because you're looking at a whole bunch of array of elements, but the actual launch time is 3.95 because what we are looking. See, the main difference that I'm trying to highlight here is you're looking at certain UI based IDs or buttons or labels to make sure that a particular element has loaded. But in this case of visual payload analysis, we are looking at it from a visual standpoint to say that whether a particular page has completely loaded or is it still loading. All right, I hope that is clear, and don't worry about making notes and how do you run this script. So these scripts have been very well documented. This page has all details as to how you run it. The main focus for me today was for me to show you that what are the different methods that you can use to basically capture these KPIs and get value out of this regression test or the test that you're running. So all this is through automation, and I've used Appium just because it's open source and easy to use, and we are huge supporters of Appium, open source and community ourselves. So going back here, so now why continue to do this, right? What is the overall value to basically do this continuously, right? We talked about it initially, needle in the haystack, all of that, right? But really to look at what is the trend, build over build. I'll take an example here, right? So typically what happens, we remember the Stone Age and the New Age that I was talking about, right? So in today's world, what happens is, let's say, I'll take a typical customer example. Let's say you have a regression test suite of, let's say, 1,000 test cases. In today's world, when you run a regression test suite of, let's say, 1,000 test cases, at the end of your test, you basically get a pass or a fail, logs, some screenshots, and that's about it, right? And maybe a video in some cases. So imagine there are 10% of these test cases that fail. That's like 100 of them. Now, imagine it's already very cumbersome because now the people have to sift through the logs, correlate those screenshots in the video and see what exactly happened, where did it fail, so on and so forth. Now, imagine once you plug this into a CI/CD pipeline. This is very common that I see with customers who are maturing and going towards a lot of automation, right? So what they do is they plug it into a CI/CD pipeline. Now they're running these 1,000 test cases after every build is checked in, or after every code is checked in. 100 failures, they just keep adding up. And after a certain time, I've seen some customers where they 70% pass, just release the build. And what happens is these are probably the issues that are actually showing up in production and causing challenges for end user, right? So fast forward today, let's say when you start capturing these key KPIs in each of your tests and look at it from the entire system level view, right? What I was showing you on the performance dashboard, it just makes the life so much more simple, where you're not looking at every possible failure, but you're looking at those important ones that you really care about. So you set threshold for login, add to cart, time to view balances, search for a flight, whatever, right? Now you're setting thresholds, and now you can set alerts on like Slack, email, HipChat, anything that you're using. So when you get alerts to go and look at those specific test cases or then the particular KPI, a business metric. So that's what I call it, right? These are not just, why did I call it key performance indicator? Because this is what the business really cares about. how much time does it take from when I open the app to really go into a checkout, or how much time does it take for me when I open the app to book a flight, book a hotel, to send money on a transaction, to play a game, whatever, right? So any metric, any kind of domain that you're looking at. So these are the business metrics that we all really care about, right? That's why we are testing and we are doing all these things. So trend analysis, so build over build. If you're able to capture these key KPIs and look at the trend, set thresholds, get alerts, this is the real value that you would get out of the regression test. So now you can set up quality gates, right? If the KPIs are above a certain threshold, you just fail the build, go ask the developers to go and look at it, or ask the testers to go and troubleshoot. Are these real genuine failures? These KPIs we really care about, in the most sophisticated way, the end-to-end testing, where you can whenever there is these alerts that you get and the builds are failed, you can straight away start going and creating tickets for the test cases that have failed. So that is the level of end-to-end automation that you can build, so that build over build, you can understand and analyze what is the experience that we can guarantee the end consumers. The other advantage or the benefit of capturing KPIs is shifting left, meaning you already know what is the experience that you can guarantee. Find these issues ahead of time. You do more testing. You're able to capture all these business valuable metrics ahead of time, right? So this just makes that I'll just take an example here of shift left, right? I'm pretty sure you guys would have experienced this. Play Store ratings, App Store ratings. These are something that everybody cares about, right? So there's a Play Store rating, 1 star. You see this app is very slow, not working. Now, when we see such reviews, what happens? The execs look at these ratings, and then immediately an email is sent to internal product teams. Guys, why is it slow? I want this to be fixed right away. Now, the QA team, like helter-skelter, runs there. Oh, what is slow? I mean, you have to go back and did we do testing? Like, what happened during testing? There's so much of chaos in this drill, right? Now let's go to this other example where I've captured the KPIs. I know that my login time is approximately in this range. My different KPIs like log out, add to cart. Let's take an e-commerce example. It's just easy and to understand. Login time is this much. Launch time to search for an item, add to cart, then checkout. I know exactly what are the ranges for each one of these KPIs, right? Now, let's say when a user says it's slow, my immediate reaction is I wouldn't panic. What would I do? I would go to the consumer and say, when you said slow, is because slow can be, for some people, like even 2 seconds is slow, or probably 10 seconds is slow, or even like 1 minute is also slow, or maybe 5 minutes, right? It is very relative. Now, when you know what is the minimum SLA that you can support or provide to end consumers. So when this kind of reviews come in, you always know that, this is the quality of experience that we guarantee. Now you can go back and do a more thoughtful and insightful discussion with the end user and go back and look at those issues. So I just want to call out and make sure that it was not just me. There was my team who really helped me with this presentation. So Navneet, Srihari, Rohith, and Shamil really helped me out with this presentation. And there's a lot of, if you see the documentation, the scripts are really well written and well documented. So I'm pretty sure when you clone the repo and start giving it a try, you'll really enjoy how they've written and how easy it is to use, and give it a try, right? So I totally encourage each one of you to basically give this a try. And this is how you stay in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and you can always reach out to us as HeadSpin, any questions. We are very active with open source community, and if you have any place where you want us to look at any business challenge that you're solving, happy to, or any technical challenge that you're really looking to solve, happy to connect. And I'm opening up the floor for questions. Feel free to post if you have any questions on the chat. So I see there are a couple of questions. I'll just take one by one. How is it? I'll just read out the question so that everybody gets to hear it. So how is it going to be different from New Relic or Conviva instrumentation, which helps to track KPIs? So that's a great question, right? So when you look at the New Relic, App Dynamics, or any of these, so these are SDK based approach, right? So you basically have an SDK, you integrate into your application, release the application, go into the Play Store, and then people, all of them, download the build, and now you're looking at real-time data and capturing these KPIs. What is this? This is real end user or RUM, or real user monitoring. So what I was trying to show you here is this is complementary to what you do with all those New Relic and App Dynamics, what we call as APM based tool, application performance monitoring tools. So in this approach, which I was explaining through the presentation today, is pre-release testing. So our post-release, when you want to monitor these KPIs for yourself so that you can track. So let's take this pre-release and both post-release. How is this different? So in this case, you're running on your own devices or cloud devices, which is you can call it synthetic monitoring, meaning you're doing first one pre-release. When you're doing regression testing, you already have your test cases written, but you're adding these KPIs in your test cases to capture value out of them. That is one thing. Post-release, on the same production build, now you have certain critical user journeys that you're basically running. Let's say you have like 5 to 10 critical user journeys that you want to measure. In that case, you add these KPIs into the scripts, and every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you run all these critical user journeys and get to know what are the KPIs that a real user is experiencing at every instant of time. What does this mean? Before the customers even start complaining, I already know ahead of time where, let's say, if I'll give you an example. So this is a very popular application wherein what happened is they were basically mostly a North America based company. So the time it takes to basically open the app and then log in was very small, because once you log in, you put in your phone number and you get a OTP, which is a one-time password. They set a timeout for like 30 seconds to get a OTP. So that was how it, and when they were expanding globally, what happened is they were consistently seeing users in APAC and EMEA not able to log in. So they were missing out on a array of customers, if you can say that. So now when they started doing these tests on HeadSpin, they basically got local devices with local SIM cards in those geos, which is what we do, right? So give you access to devices in 70 countries and 100 locations. So they basically got devices in these local countries with live SIM cards. They started running these tests, and they saw consistently that a whole bunch of these tests were not even going through initially. Now, when they looked at it, it was very interesting and fascinating because the time to get an OTP in different geos is not just 30 seconds. Sometimes it is 2 minutes, sometimes it is 1 minute. So a user was not even allowed to log in. So coming back to the point that when you do production monitoring in this way,
along with a New Relic or App Dynamics, you already have context and you're able to debug and go back and fix these issues ahead of time on the same set of devices, right? Without any extra effort. Hope that answers your question. Moving on to the next question, which is, will the KPIs change based on device type, whether it's low, mid-tier, or high-end devices? So yes, because the KPIs also depend on not just one parameter, right? So it's an array of different things. How is the CPU performing? How is the memory doing? The client side, basically the system level metrics, along with client server communication and the network, right? So because of all these things, in the low end, maybe the app launch itself takes a lot of time. Mid-tier it is faster, and high end it's even faster when it comes to the processing of the application and the CPU on top of it. And it also depends on the OS version, maybe iOS, Android. Maybe if you're looking at different other streaming and OTT streaming devices, yeah, it changes and depends on that as well.